Radio Network.
Do you find yourself asking, why am I doing this again? I feel stuck, or I can't get clarity. An Akashic Record consultation will give you unbiased guidance and insight to move past being stuck and move forward with ease. Akashic Records are your individualized thoughts, words, and actions from the spiritual world. An Akashic Record consultation pulls from the non-physical world of your past, present, and future. Contact Julie for your Akashic Records consultation. 561-945-1108. AskYourBook.com. Be in conscious alignment. That's 561-945-1108.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
South Florida, we are at 888-565-1470. We're on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM, or you can watch and listen live streaming on Facebook, or if you miss a show, you can catch the archive on YouTube.
Yes. So, what's been going on this week?
I wanted to continue our conversation from last week.
Yes.
We got onto something good, and like every week, the show just disappears too quickly. But we were talking about discomfort as the key to so many sexual problems.
Yeah, I mean, even when we look at things that may seem on the surface unrelated, we can see how there's very much a component of sexual discomfort that drives it. And by the way, I don't know if you gave the number out, but if not, let's do it again. If you want to join us tonight and call in from anywhere, the number is 888-565-1470. Right? So give us a call and join the conversation. Yeah. So when we look at HIV, for the most part, for the last several years, we know that most of the infection rates in most groups have gone down. However, where we used to really laud as a great success the decreasing numbers among IV drug users, this is now a group that we're seeing an increase in.
An increase, yes. Wow.
Yes, especially in certain areas. And the increases that we're seeing in HIV rates correspond pretty directly to areas where this opioid crisis, epidemic, however we want to describe it, is the worst.
Yeah, I always figured that the rates were relatively consistent because the percentage of the population that used IV drugs was pretty consistent, except for recently.
Well, exactly. And that's where we're really seeing this uptick starting in about 2015. Right? And, again, we know we've talked about this in so many different ways, this sort of flipping of the whole script.
Oh, yeah.
That, we have an opioid crisis that is not like anything we've ever seen before. I mean, it used to be if we saw somebody, particularly somebody with a chemical dependency, who was abusing prescription opiates, right? OxyContins, Percocets, Vicodins, all of the usual suspects.
Right.
They were doing so because they couldn't get heroin.
Yeah.
Now we see what is driving this increased heroin epidemic. A lot of that are people who can't get their Oxys, Roxys, Percocets, Vicodin anymore.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
Imagine back in 30 years ago, if somebody would have said that oxycodone or hydrocodone would be the biggest junkie-making drugs.
It would have been laughed at.
No.
By junkies.
Yeah. But it's, whether it's discomfort, well, first of all, just we all suck at pain, right? So nobody wants to be in pain.
Right.
So we have to have this automatic knee-jerk, oh, I'm in pain, give me something. I can't be in pain.
Exactly.
But we also talk about this emotional discomfort, that people are just so gawky and awkward and out of their skin when they're naked.
Yes.
Like there's something really backwards that goes on with, I guess it goes back to intimacy, like so many of our discussions.
Yeah.
That people have to get high, they have to get wasted, they have to get in the dark before they can, quote, get naked.
Right. And I think intimacy for a lot of people has become something of a traumatic experience that they need to medicate.
Yeah.
And, I hate to, draw lines in the sand like this, but I am going to say that we're seeing a lot of this, particularly coming from Gen Xers and millennials.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not your fault. It's your parents. I will blame your parents. But
it's us.
We're talking about generations that, a real lack of resilience.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the simplest way that I can put it. It's a real lack of resilience.
Everybody's too hypersensitive and can't deal with disappointment.
Absolutely. Or frustration. Don't know how to deal with things that don't go their way. Part of this we know for a long time, going on, 20 years now, this failed self-esteem movement.
Oh, you mean like everybody gets a trophy and everybody's wonderful, everybody's a winner?
Everybody's a winner.
Yeah, that was a bad trend.
Well, it really was, because...
Don't kids need to know that sometimes you win, sometimes you lose?
Well, of course.
And not everybody can be the best.
And the valuable lesson of learning that you can fail without having to be a failure.
Right.
So there's where a lot of the resilience lessons were not being taught. Instead, everybody just got participation ribbons and certificates and trophies
for
and
showing
everybody's special, which, by the way, if everybody is special, we know that means nobody is special.
It doesn't make sense.
And I'm sorry to insult some of our listeners out there, but your parents were wrong. You're really not that special.
Well, I think that's what kindergarten is for, right? Or preschool. You're supposed to show up and start to sink in, well, wait a minute. I think they were just supposed to say that because they're my parents. But maybe they're exaggerating a little bit.
Right.
Because now you're in a room with 40 of the most wonderful, most beautiful, most brilliant, most adorable children in the world.
That's right.
And you got to, wait a minute, we can't all be.
Exactly. Exactly. and I think part of that sense of, again, losing the lesson.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens now is, instead of teaching people to feel good about themselves, never quite figured out where in that lesson was, how do you deal with the times when you just don't feel good about yourself? Right? So it didn't really increase self-esteem. It just created a lot of arrogance and senses of entitlement.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lot of these failure to launch. We've talked about this before too. When we were young, and again, not to use ourselves as an example, but as some right now representative of our generation.
Yeah, we started a lot of
We couldn't wait to turn 18.
And get out.
And get a license.
That's right.
And get out and do things on your own.
We started at 15, prepping.
Exactly.
To get
That's
out.
right. We were, by the time we were able to drive, we were old pros.
Now
because
they're
we were
like
doing that. They don't want to leave the
22,
house.
23. They don't want to get a driver's license.
Nope.
They don't want to leave the house.
Nope. We kind of joked around, 27 is the new 40?
No.
I'm sorry, 40 is the new 27?
No, 27 is the new 18. I say that all the time because I really think that 27 is that kind of, what am I going to be when I grow up?
Right, yeah.
That, mom and dad's generation, that was forced on you when you were 18.
Yeah.
Get out. Go live your life. Go to the military or go get a job in a factory or get married, right? Or the cliche when women started to go to college, which was a new thing back
Well,
in
you're
the
talking about in the 40s
50s
and 50s,
right?
yeah.
They say women went to college to get an MRS degree,
Right.
just to get a husband.
Right. So, but again, even forgetting, a lot of that, gender stuff, just the idea of experiencing the world, being out there, gaining these lessons and opportunities, learning about yourself. I remember, as a matter of fact, if we were kids today, our parents would probably be arrested several times, right? Not the least. We have individual states now that are passing laws. I think Utah just passed a law saying it's okay for a kid to be out playing on their own. They can walk to school. They can walk to the store. We had parents who, were probably as close to, in some ways, overprotective as any other parent. Yet, especially on a beautiful day,
get out,
go outside, get out there, play.
Don't come back till the street lights come on.
Exactly. Be out there, do stuff.
Yeah.
And now we don't have that.
We did all that without cell phones.
That's right.
No way of getting in touch with the kids who are out. Who knows where?
I was watching a documentary on helicopter parents, and they were talking about these kids, and the parents never even knew that this was a problem for their kids. Literally live across the street from a park. The kids were, I think, 9, 8, and 6.
Oh, I remember
and they
this,
have
walking
never
home.
seen the park.
Yeah.
Because their parents would not let them cross the street in front of their house to go to the park because they said it's such a busy street. Yet when they actually kind of checked to see how busy that street was, over 2 periods of like 3 hours,
no cars.
1 car. And another one, maybe 3 cars.
Yeah, I think sex has gotten swept up into this fear that the world is so dangerous.
Yes.
Everything is dangerous. Everything's going to kill you. Everyone's going to kill you.
Right.
Everyone's going to hurt you.
Right. And there's also another part of that, too, for I think a lot of these people, that this is where the intimacy danger comes in. There's nobody to lean on. There's nobody that's going to protect me. It's when those clothes come off and I am in this room, wherever I am, with this person, it's just me.
Wow.
And that is the ultimate nakedness that I think people are so uncomfortable with. And it's not the physical nakedness. That I think people can do very, very easily.
Right. Literally naked versus figuratively naked. Right.
And that's actually what intimacy is. Right?
Getting emotionally naked.
Letting somebody see who you really are.
Right.
Not the mask that we wear.
So for a lot of people, when they get physically or literally naked, they're putting on ski masks and muckalucks and big
or doing a shot of dope,
Uggs.
or having a cocktail, or a couple of lines, or a couple of joints. Whatever it is, that's where the medicator it comes into play, and that's where we see. And again, as that's increased, we are seeing these HIV rates go along with that. And I do think it's important that we're pointing out that this is about discomfort. This is about a very frail sexual sense of sexual self that people just can't be on the line.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this on the way home from the show last week, that 25, 30 years ago, anytime anyone talked about HIV risk in a drug-using population, it was always either IV drug users who share needles or crack addicts who prostitute for crack.
Right.
And nobody was talking about how drunk is just drunk enough, right? Isn't 3 beers enough of an HIV risk factor if someone's going to lack the judgment to be safe, to protect themselves?
Yeah, yeah. When we look at the drug probably most closely associated with HIV infection, it's alcohol.
Yeah, any consequence, any STI, any unintended pregnancy, any sexual assault, alcohol's almost always involved, especially on college campuses.
And let's also be very clear, right? Because I think people need to hear this, especially guys, that alcohol is a disinhibitor. It's not a creator.
Right.
Alcohol is
I'm
not
glad
going
you're
to
making
make
that point.
somebody
Yes.
do something that they normally wouldn't do. All alcohol does is turn off that little voice that tells us we can't do it. So the
shouldn't
guy
do it.
that, when he's sober,
Right.
his wife or whoever says something, and he has that thought, oh, I want to just crack her right in the mouth. But there's that little voice that says, no, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. You're not supposed to do that. Now, when he's drunk, same thought.
No,
Only
no
now
voice. Right.
it's silent. So nothing is going to stop him from doing it. And I think that's really the key. So when you talk about so many guys, especially younger guys, that resist wearing condoms anyway, get a little buzz, it's easier to not and not even have to think about it. Even if they are well-intended, right? You have a good buzz on, the likelihood of using protection, A, is not very high, and B, the likelihood of using it correctly plummets.
Right. Oh, I'm also thinking about just that inhibition, that voice that tells the guy you're not supposed to take advantage of somebody and push that limit and do something, cross that line.
Well, sure. That kind of reminds me of something Bill Maher once said many years ago. Right, that men are pretty much only as loyal as their options. Right. And I think this kind of fits into that too, not just in terms of infidelity, but in terms of what they want to do on their own terms. What goes on in a lot of guys' heads, people really don't want to know. In spite of what looks like good behavior on the outside, there's a lot of acting with good behavior. But the intentionality that is in a lot of these heads can be pretty scary.
There's a great line from the comedian Larry Miller, right? If women actually knew what men were thinking about all the time, they would never stop slapping us.
Exactly. And that's just a fact. We can't dress up and make nice the idea that for so many males, adolescents and up to about age 30, it's frightening to me how many guys say that if they wouldn't get into trouble, or if they knew they wouldn't get caught, they would rape a woman.
That's an old idea, unfortunately.
Well, we saw that one study starting in the 90s when looking at the impact of music videos. That whole dream worlds kind of thing. But it's gone beyond that. I mean, this is population at large now. These are actually current statistics as well. When you see something like 85% of males between the ages of 15 and 25 say that they would rape a woman if they can get away with it. Not that it's the wrong thing to do or it's hurting somebody. No, the only thing stopping them is the fear of getting into trouble. And when we look at and I think what scares me or worries me more than anything with a lot of these things is the number of women that buy into this now.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the younger women that are buying into these same messages.
Well, remember these questionnaires we used to do, like in sex ed classes, especially middle school. There was the one sheet, when is it okay to force sex on a date? And it was filled with all of these, rationale or excuses.
Right.
If you spend a lot of money on the date, or if you've had sex with that person in the past, or if that person had sex with your friends, or, all the classics.
Right.
If her mouth said no, but her eyes said yes.
Sure. But again, when we look at, in that one particular study that 15 to 25, the fact that 80% of males in that age group say that they agree with that. Actually, if they spend a lot of money on a date, and women would probably like to know that the price of your virtue, the definition of a lot of money was $20.
Oh.
Right? That if spending money, let's say on a date, she is obligated to give him some kind of sexual favor in return.
Right.
The 80% of males that say that, that's not a surprise. But the 42% of girls that agree with that,
that's
that's a little
disturbing.
disheartening.
Yeah, it's especially we saw young girls.
Yeah.
12, 13, 14-year-old girls who would agree.
Right.
Yeah, I guess if you spend a lot of money on me, what, has the right to force sex?
Yeah. Well, I owe him.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an obligation. So,
And that's when sex becomes a currency,
right,
commodified, and
right,
that's the definition of prostitution.
And this is something that we see in a lot of disenfranchised areas as well. A lot of marginalized communities, poor communities, often end up being communities of color, where the HIV rates are driven by that kind of transactional prostitution.
Commodification.
It's not prostituting for money. It's a lot of these women who, I'll sleep with you if you pay my electric bill, or if you take my kids to Burger King. If you do something for me, if you pay a bill or help me out, help me take care of my kids in some way, then I will use sex as a currency.
Wow.
And we see this a lot.
Yeah.
We really do. So, even under the, well, I don't want to say best of circumstances, but, in most conditions, we see this sexual discomfort on so many levels. It's got an economic path to it.
Right.
It's got the emotional and the psychological, that lack of intimacy. And we're talking about male, female. It doesn't matter what the orientation is. This is across the board. In fact, something somebody had written in last week when we started talking about this, even when we talk about gay men, the prevalence of things like crystal meth, along with alcohol and the Viagra and PrEP. It's unbelievable. That's such a big club combination.
But it's all about disinhibiting and getting past that comfort.
It's the discomfort. Right.
People,
it keeps coming back down to that.
How often do we use that Jekyll and Hyde parable, that disconnect, that people are so uncomfortable with their sexuality that they have to make it like it's a separate being. It's this demon that lives inside of me that only when I lose control, drink the potion.
Right.
Then, what regret, what remorse. How many people get away, use being high as a way of going, I was so wasted last night, I can't believe what we did. When they know exactly what they did.
Of course. Right? It's just kind of like that idea, again, I think this is another justification for the discomfort, that we can't think about this stuff. We can't plan for it. We can't, address it head on and face to face. We'll just let ourselves get swept away.
Oh, yes.
Right?
That old one thing led to another.
That's exactly right. What a wonderfully
It's a load
bogus
of crap. It absolutely is.
Yes.
Like people are going out on a date and the thought of sex never occurs to anyone until they're in that moment. And then, of course, nobody can speak because you don't want to ruin the moment or risk it stopping. So everybody just goes with the flow.
That's right. That's right. And this way, everybody has an excuse.
And
nobody can be blamed.
One thing led to another.
That's right. See, it's not our fault.
That's right.
That's the subtext.
What's the more the epitome of discomfort than backing out, saying I had nothing to do with it. It just happened.
It just happened.
It just happened to us. Wow.
Right.
What a load.
Right. Now, do you think that as, again, looking at some of these issues related to masculinities, and, again, as I don't know how soon we can expect a vast improvement in this opioid situation, but do you think that this, again, what's being called toxic masculinity is going to be a contributing factor?
Well,
if it isn't already.
If it isn't already. And, well, now, again, the college campuses, at one time, the last bastions of free, open thinking and challenging traditional thought has now become the hypersensitive petri dish for offense and being primed to be offended. So now what's the latest University of Texas campaign?
Yes, the University of Texas.
Masculine UT.
Yes.
University of Texas, right?
Yes.
So now they're trying to What are they trying to do?
Well,
redefine masculinity.
Yes, and in spite of their protests, right? I am going to put it out this way, that even though they kind of say otherwise, there really is this movement, and a couple of other universities are kind of following suit to some degree. But there's this kind of way of now looking at defining all masculinity as toxic. Right? There's lip service. And from and every time I've heard it, it's really been more condescending. So I call it lip service to say that not all men are bad. There's some good ones out there, but I think there's, no matter how much people try to backpedal on it, like with this University of Texas thing, it's really just looking at any type of traditional or more common sense of masculinity is inherently toxic.
Yeah.
And by putting flowers in your beard,
guys have to apologize for being
right
men.
And I have to say that, as much as I'm beard. Kind of, maybe out there and, like to consider myself on the right side, I have an issue with this. I really do.
Yeah. Are we getting old and conservative?
Well, just old.
Older.
And I think, it's in reaction because, again, a lot of what we're seeing with this stuff is, again, it's lack of resilience.
It's also hijacking
hypersensitivity,
liberalism, and progressive.
Well, it really is, and I think there's a narcissism that's behind this too. Because if I feel this way, or if I think this way, then it's got to be a global truth for everybody. That's
and
kind of the
how dare
attitude.
You disagree with my truth?
How dare you? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of this, you're not the boss of me stuff is really what a lot of it comes down to. So I think we need, not just, as we've talked about before, a new maturity that we kind of attach to a general sense of masculinity. Things have been changing, sure.
Yeah.
I think we just need a new maturity.
Yeah. This new sexual revolution we're talking about all the time that have men out front, it is about just being mature. Yeah. And there's where the comfort comes in. Right?
Well, there used to be wisdom that came with age and experience.
Yeah.
We don't really see that happening all that much anymore.
Because the mind has to be open to grow. It can't be just stuck in just only tell me what I believe, just confirm my bias for a lifetime.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's the tribalism. And even something, keeping focused on like HIV, which should be devoid of all of these kinds of politics and identity play and all this kind of stuff, but it isn't. It's very much a part of this.
Still political.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
And not in the, it's the changing politics. I mean, it's not so much about homophobia anymore.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. We'll have to continue this conversation.
Right.
If you are a therapist or a therapy student and are interested in learning about getting trained in sex therapy, check out modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. My dear partner, Dr. Rachel Needle, and I, and Larry's part of our faculty, we have the pleasure of training mental health and medical professionals in sex therapy and sexual medicine. In the meantime, join us back here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers.
Yes. And feel free to write in. Have a great night.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinion